Approximately 5:20 p.m. On the 4th of November 2025 at Louisville, a massive cargo jet belonging to UPS, the MD-11, lifted off from runway 17 right, and suddenly, barely 10 seconds after liftoff from the ground, witnesses described what they saw as flames coming from the left wing, and then suddenly the unthinkable happened. The left engine fell off, the plane lost control, and it ultimately plunged into an industrial area in a massive ball of fire. This is the story of UPS Flight 2976. Today we'll be analyzing the unfortunate events that took place on the 4th of November at Louisville International Airport, Mohammed Ali Airport at Kentucky. This was a recent aviation disaster that's raised questions recently, about aging aircraft fleets and also aircraft structural fatigue. The aircraft involved was a McDonnell Douglas freighter jet with registration November 259 Uniform Papa, a very dedicated aircraft to the fleet of UPS MD-11 class. To understand the MD-11 better, we need to go back a bit to the DC-10. The DC-10 was the MD-11's predecessor. It first flew around the early 70s. It had 3 engines. It was called a tri-jet, which was very rare from most aircraft, which had either 2 or 4 engines. But in the case of the DC-10 had 3 engines. One under the left wing, one under the right wing, and one at the tail of the aircraft. It was very famous for both innovation and controversy. And a few early accidents revealed design flaws in the cargo door area and also the hydraulic systems. Alright, back to the UPS flight 2976 crash course. I'm about going off course here, as you can see. It was a flight bound for Honolulu, Hawaii. It was meant to fly all the way from Louisville, Kentucky to Honolulu, Hawaii, about an 8-hour trans-Pacific route. It was carrying mainly mail, cargo, and of course quite a lot of fuel. When they lined up runway 17 right, they were already fully configured for takeoff, flaps down, thrust set to near 100. They were fully configured for takeoff. Everything seemed normal, however, until V1. Now, for those of us who don't know what V1 is mainly the decision speed at which the pilot decides whether to continue with the takeoff or to abort the takeoff. But usually at V1 you can't abort the takeoff because there is not much runway for you to stop, so you just have to keep going no matter what happens. Even if it's an engine fire or hydraulic problem, you just have to keep going after you surpass the V1 speed. Earlier in the video, just like I connected the MD-11 to DC-10, the MD-11 also had 2 engines under the wings, 1 engine at the tail, so it was very, very, very synonymous to the DC-10. And of course, losing 1 engine is quite a serious situation to be in, but still survivable. However, losing 1 engine, the lift from the left wing, and also the pylons, the blades, and all the components of the engine is quite a catastrophic event. You see, when the left engine separated from the aircraft totally, that's created massive asymmetric drag in an aircraft like the MD-11. Now, for those of you who don't know what drag is simply the aerodynamic force that opposes an aircraft motion through the air, and that's ultimately led the MD-11 to yaw towards the dead side. At such a low altitude, the pilots only had maybe 10 seconds to react before everything went blank. The full instinct must have been, full right rudder to keep the plane even and balanced, but with some very high structural damage and probably hydraulic damage, that rudder may have been really unresponsive. The detached engine likely tore through, hydraulic and fuel lines, causing a massive wing fire, and that wing fire ultimately made the aircraft lose lift on that side, making it to yaw left and also plunge towards the industrial area. You see, at that some point during that takeoff, the cockpit warnings might have been screaming at the pilot, master caution, fire warnings, hydraulic problems, and even electrical shocks. And because it was a very heavy takeoff bound for Honolulu with some, one wing already down with fire, recovery was nearly impossible. All right, let's simplify the chain reaction. It went from engine mount fire to engine separation, leading to massive asymmetric drag, and also leading to a very uncontrollable yaw towards the left, and that led to impact within seconds of liftoff. You see, the NTSB is currently investigating the cause of the crash, and a recent report actually shows that the pilots tried to control the aircraft, to bring it back to level terms before it's unfortunately made impact with the ground. And certain sources say it might have been metal fatigue, maintenance errors, or even pylon damage, because the NTSB is also looking at the pylon, that's the part of the engine structure that holds the engine in place to the wing. They're also greatly looking at the pylon structure to make sure there were no loose bolts, no maintenance error, and things like that. Even with the MD-11's robust design, it still depends on a network of aging components, now decades old. As planes grow older, maintenance and inspections become even more critical. And pilots actually face a lot of problems with the MD-11. Problems like asymmetric thrusts, slower roll recovery, and also a network of complex hydraulics. The flight data from flight 2976 will actually influence, inspection intervals on the wing mounts and also the pylons of these trijets, and it could also lead to a fleet-wide engineering bulletin for airlines who still operate these MD-11s. For the crew, there was likely no time to react or to even understand what was happening, but only an instinct to keep fighting, to keep the aircraft level, even as systems failed one after the other. For investigators, the challenge now is to piece together how a proven workhouse could experience such a catastrophic failure at takeoff. It's pretty sad this happened. RIP to the victims.